Thank you very much. Thank you so much. You know, they asked me to be the closer of this great event. So standing here right now, I feel a little bit like Mariano Rivera, the great New York Yankee closer. You know, with Mariano, he was going to throw strikes and it was going to be hard to get on base. You also know the next words that are going to come out of my mouth just as soon as you see me standing here. Blue lives matter in America. In 1964, the great communicator offered us stern advice. It's time, Ronald Reagan observed, we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms intended for us by the founding fathers. The question is, do we really? Our nation was formed with a debt paid in blood, from the blood of Crispus Attucks and the Boston Five in 1770 through the surrender of the British at Yorktown in 1781. Those that would spend their energies, those that risked, and in so many cases lost all in establishing a nation for the ages, knew the likely price of their efforts and undertook their sacred work nonetheless. In their great founding declaration, Thomas Jefferson spoke for those patriots and the price that might be levied in writing. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And to what purpose did our founding fathers and the soldiers of our great Continental Army strive? Did they work to form the horrible mistake of what progressive Democrats call the Great Society, a place of cradle-to-grave reliance on the benevolent providence of government as the father, the mother, the breadwinner, and the teacher? I think not. You see, General Washington was rightly and fiercely proud of the nation that he believed lay within the grasp of the colonists as they struggled to tear it away from the corpulent arms of an overbearing King of England. George Washington wrote to Benjamin Franklin that no country upon earth had it more in its power to attain these blessings than United America. He went on to write that wondrously strange then, and much to be regretted indeed would it be, that we to neglect the means and to depart from the road which Providence has pointed us to so plainly. But despite what Washington believed lay before the founding patriots, they never intended to build a nation to be ruled from a throne room or a centralized government. And they weren't building a land where Boston or Philadelphia or New York City or even today's capital city that bears his name would dictate terms and conditions to the American people. No, their efforts to secure the basic human rights endowed by the Creator in formation of a most limited government instituted justly by men and deriving its limited powers from the consent of the governed. They embraced the concept of self-rule. They fought the tyranny of the throne. It's true. They fought to end the abuse of the colonies at the hand of an uncaring and unsympathetic master, but seemingly forgotten, yet chief among the complaints outlined by Jefferson in his great declaration was the refusal of the monarchy to craft and enforce needed laws. Wholesome and necessary, Jefferson said, to the public good and of immediate and pressing importance, they told the King of England. The law, they said, a law that works, a respect and reverence to the rule of law. These goals were as key at the founding of our great republic as the need to satisfy our thirst for freedom in religion, in assembly, and a free and unfettered media that we keep hearing so much about today. And so it was through the challenging first century, leading to the great upheaval of the Civil War, when the very survival of this republic was at issue. The great emancipator hearkened back to Jefferson's words in spurring his Congress to action, asking his generation whether they might be as brave and bold as Adams and Jefferson and Madison, as willing to risk and win or risk and lose at the same level. Abraham Lincoln said, "Let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his posterity swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of the country and never to tolerate their violation by others." Lincoln said that as the patriots of '76 did in support of the Declaration of Independence, so to the support of the Constitution and laws, let every American pledge his life, his prosperity, and his sacred honor. Lincoln said, let every man remember that to violate the law is to trample on the blood of his father and to tear the character of his own and his children's liberty. Abraham Lincoln is among our greatest examples of the courage of conviction and of the powers of morality and resolute belief. In reason, surely, but primarily and notably in respect for the law. To Lincoln, not just the president by the legislator and trial jurist, no, the law itself was justice. It was morality. It was providence itself, as all that was good and right in our American life flowed from its wellspring. The law and respect for the law and the humble willingness of all Americans to follow both the letter, but more importantly, the spirit of the law, defines our national character and our identity. Lincoln prayed that reverence and allegiance to the law would be on the lips of every American mother and child, taught in our schools and colleges, be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in the legislatures, and sternly enforced in our courts of justice. For as Lincoln knew, the failure to adhere to that standard in our shared American life would surely result in our surrender. First, to the immorality of convenience, then to the sloth of inaction, and finally, to the shame of irrelevance. We joined together this past week, having traveled distances measured in both miles and in some cases in days, to come to the banks of a great capital city made of granite and marble. And on our travels here, we surely felt the great pride associated with traveling to a city named for one of the greatest leaders in America. You see, our first president once stated, "We are either a united people or we are not." He said, "If it is the former, then let us in all matters of general concern act as a nation which has national objects to promote and a national character to support." He said, "If we are not, then let us no longer act a farce by pretending to it." So I ask, are we now acting out the farce that President Washington predicted? We have matters under consideration in this capital city, most notably concerning immigration law and its enforcement, that even the most jaded among us would begrudgingly concede are of national importance to everyone. We have border states, most notably on our southern border, that have to date disproportionately borne the brunt and burden of our failure to act over the past decades. But is there a state in this union in which the impact of that failure is not keenly felt by the American people? Yet we seem to have fallen to a place and a time in our national discourse where even the mere restatement and affirmation of laws long ago crafted and duly enacted by our constitutional republic's legislature laws that were formed and codified in the people's house by the people's representatives is now considered controversial? In the executive memoranda on immigration laws attested to this past week, no new laws were created. No group was put at risk without affording them due process. The rights of not one of our citizens, even in a land where president, senator, and farmer stand shoulder to shoulder as equals, was imperiled in the least. Instead, we merely restated the laws that were what they have been and voiced an intent to see them upheld fairly, impartially, and with a haste born of necessity. And yet, in our modern times, that is viewed in some circles as oppressive, as controversial, and as wrong. Seriously? Homeland Security Secretary and retired Marine General John Kelly wrote, "Through the passage of immigration laws, Congress has established a comprehensive statutory regime to remove aliens expeditiously from the United States and according to," now listen to this, "in accordance with all applicable due process of law." Secretary Kelly further stated that, "I am determined that the faithful execution of our immigration laws is best achieved by using all these statutory authorities to the greatest extent possible." And yet there are still those that would have us believe that these words signal injustice and are rife with hatred. Really? Are worthy of draping Lady Liberty in New York Harbor with a disgraceful tag that signals a belief that somehow, in a perversion of thought, Americans are against immigrants, or have forgotten our shared history as that famed melting pot? Do some critics truly believe that we have become that Orwellian nightmare that views all Americans as equal, yet with some more equal than others? Come on now, seriously. You see, those that oppose the rule of law and the applicability of the law in immigration, surely, but in other avenues of American life as well, they offer no vision, only lawlessness, obstruction, and chaos. They offer no morality and certainly no courage. They offer only appeasement and the false currencies of concession and popularity over the virtues of morality and certainty. It was Ronald Reagan who said, "The specter of our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face is that their policy of accommodation is appeasement, and appeasement does not give you a choice between peace and war, only between fight and surrender." Reagan said, "We are told that the problem is too complex for a simple answer." He said they are wrong. There is no easy answer, but there is a simple answer. We must have the courage to do what we know is morally right, and this policy of accommodation asks us to accept the greatest possible immorality. How fitting that Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center, a block from the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue, houses the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Service. And think just for a moment about how that refreshing and bold, his brave and soaring language sounds in an era in which so many of our liberal legislators mark as their key data point in crafting policy how many Facebook likes their pages get, or what the latest internet polling shows, or how many smiling emojis follow their every move. They do not make choices based on any core beliefs, at the risk of their very lives and their seat in the Capitol building as need dictate in pursuing freedom, liberty, or the need for unlimited scope of government. And they are certainly not prepared to be bold and aggressive in leading, or to boldly leave the safety of the middle to enact the agenda that the American people have cried out for. I, for one, find no safe harbor or vista-like view on the middle ground, wheedling and seeking for others to acknowledge the virtue of my actions. You see, I, like President Reagan, see things not only as left and right, but as forward and backward, swimming sometimes against a powerful tide or simply treading water, fundamentally failing our duty to make any choice at all by voting present. Ronald Reagan said that for almost 2 centuries we have proved man's capacity for self-government, but today we are told we must choose between a left and a right, or as others suggest, a third alternative, a kind of safe middle ground. Reagan went on to say, I suggest to you that there is no left or right, only an up and a down, up to the maximum of individual freedom, consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. As a career cop, as I call myself, I've spent my life's work to date in the noble field of public safety, a profession whose very success is dependent on the moral and legal authority and generously bestowed powers of the governed. That's you, the people. It relies upon our people trusting in the integrity of an ancient and time-proven system and my profession's adherence to a code of fairness, impartiality, and honor. It is a trust that is built upon bedrock, and it finds that bedrock in the rule of law, in the code of the very founding of our great society, that in return for the benefits of our social order, we agree to live according to certain laws and rules, with processes created to grieve perceived wrongs and violations, and institutions that oversee and have the final say over such rules and laws. We, the people, do not simply follow established rules because a law enforcement officer is present to enforce them, but because of our basic love of, trust of, and reliance on our fellow citizens. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter once wrote, if one man can be allowed to determine for himself what the law is, then every man can. That means first chaos and then tyranny. American law enforcement officers have always understood this simple truth, and they spend their life's work, as I have thus far, exemplifying my faith in, my belief in, and commitment to our American system of justice, a system renowned the world over for the provisions of individual due process as a right endowed in each of us by our Creator. The rule of law doesn't divide us. It binds us together in our great American life with shared behaviors, beliefs, and manners. I call it, as do many of you, American exceptionalism. We are a nation of limited government in which everyone willfully and as a matter of civic duty must obey the law. And the value derived for the small price paid of observance of the common law is the greatest treasure known to mankind. Freedom, sweet freedom. Sweet-tempered and forged by what Washington once called the sacred fire of liberty. And freedom, my conservative friends, is no small a la carte side dish at a fine restaurant. It is the main event, the heavyweight title fight, the reason we dress and come to the party. Freedom is why we get up in the morning and tend the fields. It is why we stay up late at night watching foreign markets. It sustains us. It feeds us. And once we have tasted it, we can never have enough to be satisfied. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A piece of freedom is no longer enough for human beings, nor for the nation. Unlike bread," he went on to say, "a slice of liberty does not finish hunger. Freedom is like life. It cannot be had in installments. Freedom is indivisible," he said. "We have it all, or we are not free." And at its core, as a conservative, I believe with all of my heart that in furtherance of the common good, freedom means you decide your destiny. You, your family, your household, your neighborhood, your small town, your state, and yes, in those few matters of national scope, your nation. But to cede as a matter of simple course of expediency, to cede those powers too quickly or injudiciously to Washington, D.C. is just plain wrong. And it always has been. So as Ronald Reagan said, we have come to a time for choosing. President Reagan challenged us that either we accept the responsibility for our own destiny or we abandon the American Revolution and confess that an intellectual belief in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan our own lives. How refreshing is that simple concept that we who run our lives know the course of our own destiny better than some congresswoman from California, better than some judge from Joplin may know it, sitting in a mahogany panel office in Washington, making the decisions that can undermine all of our great efforts. And how refreshing to see a return to that respectful thought of the importance of self-determination and a turn away from the conceit and arrogance that was its predecessor at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue before January 20th, 2017. At the close of last year, we came together in one of the enduring shared moments in our modern American life. Our nation made among the most profound choices that we can make. And President Donald Trump, we have chosen a leader who I expect many of you in this room well know I both campaigned and vigorously supported for the highest office in this land. And he was a candidate that I am certain many in this room also supported. And some may have at first opposed in some measure, and that's fine. That's the great nature of this republic. We have choices and we decide. However, in President Trump, I sense a return now to those key virtues first extolled in that letter to a tyrant monarch in 1776. I sense a pride in our nation and a voice to that pride that I have found lacking for the last 8 years. We were constantly told by former President Obama that America needed to humble itself. He told us humility is a virtue. But false humility is an affront to the senses. And pride in the greatness and might of our nation has never been a sin. President George Washington himself observed upon the occasion of his first inaugural, "There is a rank due to the United States among nations which will be withheld, if not absolutely lost, by the reputation of weakness." Consider those words once more. A rank due the United States of America. Allow me to translate that language from 1789 to 2017. It means put America first. Last month, I had one of the greatest experiences of my lifetime as I joined so many in a solemn and dignified ceremony steeped in tradition on the steps of our nation's capital in the inauguration of our 45th chief executive. And the mainstream media chose largely to mock and taunt the image of our nation laid before us by our newest chief executive. They desire to convince we the people that his vision is dark and feral. No, it's not. Yet those that held the office before President Trump would rise up from their graves and nod in agreement with the importance of our shared effort and potential for reward that President Trump offered us when he said, "We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country, restore its promise, not for an elite few, but for all of our people." He said, "Together, we will determine the course of America and the world for many years to come." President Trump reminded us, we will face challenges, we will confront hardships, but we will get the job done. My friends, I close as I open with the words of the great man from Eureka College. "You and I have a rendezvous with destiny," Reagan once said. "We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness. If we fail, at least let our children and our children's children say of us, we justified our brief moment here. We did all that could be done." We, the children of the Cold War, the sons and daughters of the greatest generation, knew what it meant to stand up to foreign despots and live under the seeming threat of annihilation. But those who ruled our nation as we waited our turn at the head of the table never allowed that fear to cow them into inaction. So now at this time, and for this generation acting under the mantle of our leadership, we must ask this question: what will our children say of us? Ladies and gentlemen, today is our moment of truth, our point of no return. The choices we need make at this moment are opposed by entrenched interest. The resistance looms. They attack our motives. They assail our beliefs. They decry our notion of justice. They proclaim the high ground of virtue and threaten upheaval if not given their way. What will history show what we did with our moment of truth? Did we stand and fight, or did we cut and run? Ladies and gentlemen, this is my challenge to you. These are your marching orders. Go forth to stand and fight. Thank you so much. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless these United States of America.